us, say hi in the chat. Hello. Okay, Linda and Sharon. That's helpful. And Rick, good to see you. So
I knew Rick would be here.
You knew that, huh?
Uh-huh.
Well, in the essence of time, let's go ahead and get started, Leanne. And
All
if
right.
people come on, then they can come on, but we'll get this show on the road.
Okay, you got it. Well, good evening, everyone, to our attendees that are coming back for the take two due to a little glitch we had the other night. So welcome and good evening. This is our next to last, well, not really next to last. Anyway, we have placement coming up after this, and we'll have Zach tomorrow morning. Don't forget, that's 11 a.m. Eastern, and we're all looking forward to that. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Robin.
All right. Yeah, and welcome everybody. I am glad to see you all that did come back on here for this recap of the day 3, which was funding. And in order to kind of set things up a little bit, I want to kind of go over what funding was before when the movement first got started. And it was basically just cash. All you needed was cash to buy a tiny house. The builders would build them and you would pay cash. Now, that might have to be cash that you borrowed from your parents. It might be cash you already had. It might be credit cards. It might be a consumer loan or a signature loan, similar to, for instance, Lightstream. SunTrust had a product called Lightstream that was basically a signature loan where you had to qualify personally. But none of these loans used the tiny house as collateral for that loan until Liberty Bank of Utah came, and they went into the market and they actually used the tiny house as collateral. So Kendall came on 2 nights ago. We had a great time with him, and we are actually having him back on an encore recall here, and he's going to be taking things over here. Kendall Phillips of Liberty Bank. He's the president and CEO. I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to you.
Well, thank you, and hello, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here again to go through this recording again. And I think the second time will be even better because we're going to be more prepared. So not only on the recording side, but me as well. The other night, Robin, you were mentioning the quote, "I'm debt free." And that really resonated to me. And this was a quote by Dave Ramsey yelling out that I'm debt free because it is a viable option for affordable housing. And I really want to recognize that first and foremost. That's where my heart is. That's where the passion is of how we and why we are in this industry right now, because it's a solution to affordable housing. As you mentioned, you can always go out and pay cash. You can go out and borrow money. You can go out and if you have a home right now, you can borrow money against your current home, pulling cash out, doing a refinance, or you can look for other ways of financing at your local credit union, local community bank. There's some other options. This is what we have found that we have enjoyed doing this specific lending product because it's in great need. So with that being said, and I know, Robin, you kind of also went into great detail about your 44X. Do you want to explain that before I move on?
Sure, absolutely. I'd be happy to. And some people were asking about that. The Innovative Housing Showcase a couple of years ago in Washington, D.C., I had the privilege of attending, and Ben Carson, the then Secretary of HUD, did a speech, and he had done some research and found out that the net worth of someone that owned a home was 44 times that of someone who was renting a home. And I never forgot that. It just kept rolling around in my brain that home ownership was so important. Not only do you, when you own a home, do you build up equity in a house, you also pay down the home. You also get some great tax benefits from it. So there's a lot of advantages to home ownership that you don't get when you're renting. You're basically just throwing your money out the window, as far as I'm concerned. When you're renting, and think about this, you're buying that house for the landlord when you're renting. And so that landlord wants to make money. So if you as a homeowner can go out and buy a home, most likely your payments are going to be less than if you rent a home. Only because, I had some examples here where $100,000 house, it was $107,000 home, was, if I remember correct, was renting for $1,200 a month. And I calculated everything out on my calculator for a 3% loan, that mortgage would cost them $546, and then you add a little bit for taxes and insurance. And so PITI, you're all in at somewhere around $840, which is a lot less than $1,200. So with that example, with that in mind, and with tiny houses being between $50,000 and $100,000 in range for the most of them, that I felt like, this 44X was a great 44X. Now I want to be a homeowner. Now I want to get into that where my net worth is 44 times that of somebody who's renting, and I want to do that as quickly as it possibly can. So that's why we started this 5-day challenge, to get people who are thinking about going tiny and they haven't yet. They want to go from a zero to a path to tiny house ownership within the next 5 days, basically, for the 5-day challenge. So that's where the 44X came from.
So with that being said, I'm going to do a share screen. Is that open for me, Jordan?
Indeed it is.
So during my, can everyone see that?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
During my discussion, if there's any questions, I would like to take the enthusiasm of those questions and answer them as we go. So please do not hesitate to ask questions. And I'm going to try to be as informative as I can through this process.
And if I see a question, then do I just wait until the next slide and jump in on with that question? Is that how you want to do it?
And I'll certainly pause, and I might go back and forth, but we can certainly. I want to take the advantage of addressing those issues right away. So Liberty Bank, we started in our tiny home quest in 2015. For us, it was addressing the affordable housing issue, which is still a very big need today. Some of the biggest challenges that we have in the tiny home industry is the resting spot and affordable financing. And I want to be able to address the affordable financing today. I still would like to urge all the buyers out there to continue to be resourceful on where they can park their tiny homes. Out of the component of financing the tiny home, that's one portion of it, and the final resting spot is going to be another challenge. Our mission is to make sure we are addressing affordable housing. There's a saying, it's only a house until you make it a home. That's one of the pleasures that we've had with the tiny home industry. Typically, we require 20% down payment. We have terms going out to 5, 10, 15, and 23 years. Minimum FICO score is 680. Rates vary from 6 to 10%. Now, one of the questions that was submitted was, why is the interest rate so much higher than the current mortgage rates? The mortgage rates are based upon Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac products. once closed, they go to a mortgage-backed security, and they're traded in Wall Street, and you have insurance companies that buy mortgage-backed securities. This is not a tradable asset. We keep our paper, and one of the benefits of us keeping the paper is that we will make sure that first and foremost, if you have any issues of making the payments, like through a COVID-19 pandemic, there was some deferrals that we were very accommodating for during the COVID time period. So we understand the industry, we understand what's going on with the economics. If there's problems throughout the life of the loan, we would like to be able to address those head on. Typically, you would not find that at a larger mortgage company. I hope you would, but we specifically have taken a lot of pride in financing tiny homes for that purpose. One of the reasons why we're using NOAA and other certified inspectors is to make sure that the home is built for not only safety, habitability, marketability, but also durability. We want to make sure that those tiny homes that are being built last as long as you are able to take care of them. So on this very specific slide, any questions on these items so far?
I have, I don't see any questions in the chat, but if you have a question, you can either raise your hand on the, or you can go into the chat and ask the question, but you can go to an emoji and you could, I believe you can still raise your hands on this, but definitely we're monitoring the chat. And I had a thought too that just went out of my brain, but it'll come back to me in a minute. And the question that Rick just posed in there said, do you lend nationally, Kendall?
Yes, we do. Every state has its own unique characteristics. And if you are in states that are leading the way in tiny homes, you might have more regulations. There might be less regulations in some, but every state has their own jurisdiction and DMV characteristics. So get to know your specific state, get to know what those fees are. Check in with your local municipality. Where is it acceptable to park your tiny home? Find out what the registration, the licensing requirements are. And typically with the build process, they would be asking these same questions as well. So every state has its unique characteristics. So just be aware of that. We also strive to stay up to date on those items, and they're ever changing. So that's a very good question.
So the answer is, I guess, yes, you do lend nationally, but
Yes.
you have to check out the specific states. Sharon wants to know, is the 6 to 10% based on loan term or credit score or both?
All the above.
All the above, both, okay.
All the above, yep. So I know that the 20% down payment, there are grants available for tiny homes and affordable housing. I would also look at your local municipality to see if there's any grants available for affordable housing, and this may qualify for affordable housing. So that's something you will also want to look into. What does it take?
One more question here, Kendall, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Rick wants to know, do you finance tiny house villages for rentals? And I guess kind of a sidebar to that, do you finance non-owner occupied tiny houses? So
Great.
Tiny house villages are non-owner occupied.
No, that's a great question. So tiny home community villages are popping up left and right. We do not finance the actual tiny home community village. Our focus, our niche is on the consumer end product, which is the tiny home house. Whether it's owner occupied or non-owner occupied, we have programs for both. And the criteria and the underwriting is according to that, to those needs. So the answer to your question is yes, we do finance non-owner occupied and also owner occupied. Any other questions on that?
There is another question.
Oh, yeah. Does
Okay.
Liberty offer grants to any specific demographic, for example, 65 plus folks?
We do not offer grants. There are nonprofit organizations out there that are offering grants. And there's also grants available in local municipalities. And I would again just check your local municipality for local affordable housing grants.
Yeah, and I can throw out Operation Tiny House. They do have grant money. It's a 1-for-1 grant. Basically, if you have 10%, they'll come up with the other 10%. But they do have limited resources. So last time I heard, Rapport, what's her name?
Gabrielle.
Gabrielle Rapport said they did have $15,000 in their coffer. They were looking for some place to put it. So just so you know, that is a real resource. And to qualify for that grant, it was pretty easy to qualify for that grant. So just one that I wanted to throw out there because that is part of the tiny house world. And she is specifically tiny house oriented and comes to a lot of the shows.
So I don't know if any of you are in the areas where there's hurricanes and tornadoes and other calamities, but FEMA also puts out occasionally, based upon certain areas that have been hit, opportunities to rebuild. And I know that there's been some discussion on those areas that have been hard hit by disasters. So keep that in mind as well.
Great.
So we look at your current income, bank statements, tax returns, your government issued ID. Prior to funding, and just going back to the pre-qualification, once we have a full application, and typically a full application, we would need a 72-hour period to approve your loan. If we don't have everything, we would approve it based upon stipulations, but based upon a full application, we can give you an answer within 72 hours. So keep that in mind. Once the building starts, and this is a key component, once the building starts, we will be updating your credit package. During that time period, it's very important that you stay employed. It's very important that you don't go out and buy a bunch of cars and rack up more consumer debt, because we will relook at the approval prior to closing. And if there's changes, there might be some problems with the final close. So when you get pre-qualified, and by the time the builder is done with the tiny home, just make sure that your credit has maintained that stability.
All right. Well, Linda wants to know what is the debt to, I guess it's debt to income ratio.
The maximum debt to income ratio is 43%. And based upon that, we also look at the lot rental. So if you're renting your lot, that would be calculated into the debt to income ratio. Now, we just recently approved a loan on an Indian reservation where the land was, there was no lot rental. We've had parents that have said that their kids can park their tiny home on their lot. Even though there is a free rent, we still calculate a buffer in case those circumstances do change, but we do calculate that into the DTI.
And tiny house, search tiny house villages. Jill is going to come on here in about an hour, will have some of those numbers for you if you're wondering what lot rent is going to go. All right, one more question on the previous slide. When you are looking at W-2s, obviously you were talking, there are employees. There is a question regarding self-employed. Would you fund somebody who is self-employed? Is there an avenue for that?
Absolutely. And we actually have self-employed, non-owner occupied buyers. So we would look at that from a perspective of their tax returns. We'd be looking at a minimum of 2-year average tax returns. Of course, if they're buying the tiny home as a non-owner occupied, we'd be looking at their experience of being a landlord. Those are also key factors in looking at a non-owner occupied loan. But the self-employed borrower is not a problem.
All right, and then one more from a previous question was someone that is using retirement money, in other words, Social Security, IRAs, and pensions and that kind of thing. So they've retired, but they have an income. Is there an avenue for them to get qualified?
Absolutely. As long as it's consistent and it's a viable source of income. And there's a lot of uniqueness going into an underwriting of a loan. Not one loan is the same. They're all different in terms of their characteristics. So just keep that in mind. Once you are in the tiny home and you've purchased the tiny home, our goal is to make sure that you're able to stay in that home. The last thing we want to do is put you in a home where you can't afford it. And then circumstances would be that we would have to take it back. So that's something that we're absolutely trying to avoid. We want to make sure that you have the ability to get into the home and to stay in the home.
All right, thank you, Kendall.
The inspection of the tiny home, our third-party inspectors do a phenomenal job. And just as a recap, what we get from NOAA and other certified inspectors is a report. And prior to closing and funding, we will send out an inspector to look at the tiny home to make sure that that home meets all the criteria of the best building standards. And that includes the safety, the habitability, the marketability, and the durability. There's a lot of creativity with tiny homes. There's a lot of individuality that goes into each tiny home. And it's a lot of fun to see all the different designs of the tiny homes. But we send out the inspector to make sure that first and foremost, we have the VIN number, we have a good trailer, it's built up to code. We want to make sure that all of the proper materials were used in that build accordingly, and it meets that criteria. We're not builders, but that's why we want to make sure that the builders are qualified and our third-party certified inspector does that inspection. One of the things, after getting that report, we send that report to the borrower and to the insurance company. So that report stays with the buyer, and the insurance company loves it because they understand what they're insuring.
That's good to know. And on the one of the questions that we had last time, obviously you have certain builders that are on your list of builders that you have vetted, and you make sure that they are building a quality product, etc. Do all of your tiny homes need to be certified before you would lend on them?
Absolutely. So this raises a question of DIYs. And I don't have anything against DIYs. If they're using a service like NOAA, then you should not have any problems for the long-term financing takeout. And when I say the long-term financing, that's going to be after the tiny home has been built and it has the occupancy permit, basically, if you will, so that you can live in it. So the certification is extremely important. For those who are doing a DIY, stay very close to NOAA and let them give you feedback to make sure that you meet that criteria so that you have that ability to show that it's been built to the highest quality.
And guys, that's important. What Kendall just pointed out is very important, because in the past, you know, the challenge has been, yeah, okay, the manufacturers, we know they were builders and that kind of thing. Even with the insurance companies, they were like, I don't know about these DIY builds, you know, and that kind of thing. And because toot our horn a little bit, because we came in to the picture in 2016, early, we started in 2015, but we really started inspecting in 2016. And we've been doing this all along. The insurance companies and now Liberty Bank is saying, and you don't understand what they're saying. They're saying that if you get it inspected by somebody like NOAA, which I think we have probably the only one that does virtual inspections out there right now, but there very possibly are going to be popping up other you know, inspection and certification companies out there. But we do such a good job doing that inspection, where we inspected at various stages of construction. We digitize and store that whole inspection, that a bank like Liberty Bank feels comfortable doing that loan for a DIY, as long as it was inspected and certified by a company like NOAA, because they know that like we had on last night, and like James Brewer said, we stay on their butt. We make sure that they're building a quality product. And if it's not, then they're not going to get a seal for it. So that kind of opens the world up to DIYers, to some lending that wasn't out there before. I didn't know about this until the Wednesday night. I didn't even know about this. So I just wanted to stress that point, that that's a big deal. And then the last question that I want to ask you, Kendall, can they get a list of the builders that have already been approved on your approved builder list? Is that possible?
If you would like we would give you a list of approved builders. We would also want to know kind of where you're at. If you're in California, we're not going to give you somebody in Florida, and vice versa. But we'd be glad to help out in that process. We have very good builders, and I would probably give you a list of 5 and close to where you're at. And I want to make sure that we don't have any conflict with our builders, because we have a lot of really good builders. So with that being said, we make sure we don't get into any issues with our current builders, but we would provide some approved builders to you. Absolutely.
Okay, and Rick was asking, do you guys work with any particular insurance company?
Yeah, we do have some favorites. I want to make sure that first and foremost, the buyer has the option of getting their own insurance, and if they need help, we'd be glad to help them out with that. We'd give them a list of maybe 3 or 4 different vendors, and they can go out and pick their own.
Okay, great.
The other component of the report that NOAA does, and I want to emphasize this: when you buy a home from a builder, and then when you want to sell that home down the line, and they are looking for financing, if we were doing a used tiny home, we would want to know, first of all, did we finance it? Who is the builder? Do we have a NOAA report, or do we have a certified inspection that has been done on it? If it comes to us from a DIY and we don't know who the builder is and the builder is not approved, most likely we would not approve it. It would entail a very elaborate inspection by NOAA, and just getting to know if it was built to code. That's a challenge, and I'm sure throughout the process, Robin has expanded on that. So, but we look at the report as something that you can then take forward when you want to go and sell it. You can say, hey, here's the report I got when I built it. If you have any questions, you can contact NOAA. They did the inspections, and it works out really well. It provides marketability when you go to sell the tiny home.
And what he's talking about here, guys, is this report. Now, you get an inspection, you get a home certified, and it doesn't have to be just certified by NOAA, one of the approved certified companies. But then this report is a report, even though it's been inspected and certified and has a seal on it. Liberty Bank wants eyes on it. It might have, they want a special report that we do for them. And it's, how many pages do you think that report is when we do it, Kendall?
It's about probably 12 to 15. I mean, it's not only it's not only just the different components of like the VIN number, the heater, the roof, the windows, but it has pictures and it has detailed narrative. It's very helpful. And from an insurance perspective, they love it.
And so that's what he's talking about, that you can take that report with you to the insurance company, or if you want to sell it, that really makes the home a little bit more marketable.
So we're all obviously looking for experienced builders. We love the tiny home builders because they're very passionate about what they're doing. We're very excited with the builders we have. We will finance new and used tiny homes from our expanding approved builder list. So I just want to emphasize that. I think I've already talked about that.
And there was a question, Kendall, that I think you answered. Rick said, well, how would we ask for that builder list? They just contact you to get that builder list?
Yep.
Okay.
And obviously, if you pick one of our approved builders list, I mean, we want to make sure that you're happy with that selection. We want to make sure that is a good fit for you. So, and I know that NOAA has also some very good builders. Our builders, we have some very similar builders, but there's some builders that are both unique to both NOAA and Liberty. We're constantly expanding our approved builder list. So, and going back to the DIYs, if you are dead set on being a DIY, good for you, and we wish you the very best. And then one day you might become one of these approved builders, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It starts somewhere, and I love the entrepreneurial spirit that goes with a DIY. And there might be an opportunity there as you continue to expand and perfect that process.
Linda wants to know, do you work with any builders in Canada, or would you?
We have worked with builders in Canada. Canada, there are some fine builders up there. And one of the issues that you're going to have to be aware of, especially with the exchange rate issues, is there might be some advantages of buying a tiny home up in Canada, but then those exchange rates fluctuate. So just be aware with the currency risk of buying a tiny home up in Canada, that you're gonna have to deal with the exchange risk, opportunity or risk. The other issue with buying a tiny home from Canada is when you bring it across the border and you have specific states that have very specific requirements. just be aware of when it arrives in the United States, and if you are landing it in like Oregon or Washington or California, just make sure you're doing your homework on what those requirements are. I'm not going to expand on how to become an approved builder. Excuse me, because I know that majority of y'all are buyers. Common questions, and obviously I'm learning a lot with all the questions that have been asked so far. Can I add some upgrades to my tiny home? And the answer is yes. If you're adding on a jacuzzi or a swimming pool or anything exotic, typically they would be extra, and we do take that into consideration. Our tiny home loans are on average under 100,000. We go above 100,000 up to 125, and it's a case by case. Typically, we have strived to keep our loans under 100,000 because our goal is to help make this affordable. Can I get a gift from a family member to pay the down payment? Yes. Can you get grants? Yes. Do you finance tiny homes on a foundation? The answer is yes. When you put a tiny home on a foundation, it becomes real property. And then with that, you have title reports, appraisals, and there's a different set of regulations that go with real estate than just a regular tiny home on wheels. So just be aware that it's a different process once it becomes on a foundation, but it can be done. What happens if the client does not qualify anymore after the pre-qualification process? As I mentioned with COVID, we've had some issues during that COVID time period. We do work through that process with the borrower and with the builder. Just please don't go out and rack up more debt when you are in that pre-qualification stage. When you put that 20% down on the down payment, that 20% goes to the builder. So that's when you execute the contract. And that contract, when we look at that contract, we want to make sure that there's a VIN number on that contract, because that VIN number would be the trailer that would be the basis of the collateral. That contract would also have a resting spot, so we know where the jurisdiction is of where. For example, if you're building a tiny home in California versus Wyoming, completely different regulations. So having that resting spot helps identify the builder what's going to be required for that municipality, and of course you as a buyer need to also know that as well. Don't deliver the tiny home until we close and fund the loan. I'm going to back up on this one. When you give your 20% to the builder, I'm going to make another recommendation: is make sure that you have that VIN number on the contract. And I know that that's important, but we also want to make sure that we're protecting not only the builders and also the buyers in this process. When the tiny home is done, that's when we do the inspection. And when we do the inspection, we want to verify that the tiny home is done, and that's when we'll approve and close and fund the loan. And of course, your interest is our interest, and so we want to make sure that through that process, we are kind of partners in that regard, because we want to make sure that you benefit from that transaction. Carolyn Smith is one of our. She is our tiny home lending manager. Carolyn, are you on the line with us?
Jordan,
Maybe.
can you check and see if
No,
Carolyn's on
she's
there?
not.
Okay, I know that she was on the other night. So what other questions? And I'm just going to look at some of the other questions that were asked.
I have
Sorry,
a
go
couple here.
ahead.
Elizabeth wants to know that the VIN number comes on the trailer, right? Question mark. So I believe the answer to that is yes. Normally the VIN number is on the tongue of the trailer.
Correct, and that's one of the things that NOAA and other certified inspectors look at for us at the time of closing. And that matches up to the records that we have. And so that goes on the report.
And make sure, that's something important, that the VIN number that's on the contract that you have, guys, is the VIN number on the trailer that you get delivered to you. We have had a situation where there was, I don't know whether it was inadvertently, but the trailer got switched and there was a different VIN number. And that's why we do an inspection for Liberty Bank after the home is built, and we do verify the VIN number at that time for that unit. There's a question here. Can I get the money as the payments to the builder become due, or is it all after the build is completed?
So we close, and again, this is for the consumer benefit. We close the long-term takeout for the buyer, for the borrower at time of completion of the unit. If you make other arrangements with the builder to fund more than 20%, that's between you and the builder. We don't get involved in that contract. If that's what you want to do, that's, we support your business transaction with the builder. And if you are giving the builder more than 20% during the build process, again, that's up to you. And I would just make sure that you're getting some type of report from the builder or from NOAA, giving you kind of feedback as to how the build project is doing. I mean, the last thing we want to end up is having a builder taking your money and going to Tijuana and not coming back. We want to make sure that at the end of the day, the builders are completing the project. And all of our builders are very, very, very reputable. And again, this is another reason why we want to make sure we're vetting the builder. You should be vetting the builder. NOAA is constantly vetting the builder. We're all in this together. We want to make sure that this is a good experience for everyone.
And that's one of the reasons to vet the builder carefully and their financial stability, so that when you do give them the 20% down, that they do have the capability of finishing that house for you. And that's important when we do that, or when Liberty does that. I mean, they're approved builders. They do have to show some kind of financial stability and the resources to handle things. So, and then what about if they do? This is brings up a good question, Kendall. What if they do put 30% down? Do you pay the builder? Does the buyer need to let you know that they put more than 20% down? Does that factor into your equation at all?
Oh, absolutely. And we'll and that's part of the pre-qualification process. We'll look at the down payment. We'll look at the down payment that the buyers have put down. We'll verify that. Obviously, that's skin in the game, and that should be to your credit. And at the same time, the builders are also looking at the borrower's ability to complete the tiny home. When they're done with the tiny home, they want to be paid. So they're looking at the buyer's strength. They're looking to us to make sure that we pre-qualify them. The last thing they want to do is get to the completion date and then not being able to get their money. They have other obligations. They have to pay for the material. They have labor. They have payroll. So they want to make sure that this is a win-win for them as well. So we try to help bridge that gap for the buyer and for the builder.
Okay. Can I get my builder approved if I purchase a NOAA membership? In other words, if somebody's not and I don't think it has much to do with the NOAA membership as it does to if they have a builder that they like that's not on the approved builder list, can they get approved, I guess?
We're approving builders all the time.
Okay.
And we just want to make sure that we understand who they are, how long they've been doing it, what type of reputation do they have. But you know, at the end of the day, we're looking at this from a long-term perspective, and we have a lot of good builders. And I just say, you know what, together we would be looking at that as an opportunity as well.
And the last question I have here, Kendall, is have you had to do any foreclosures?
You know what? In the last 7 years, I'm in the process of doing my first right now.
That's a pretty good track record, I think.
So, and actually, you know what? I'm looking forward to it, because then I can say that we have had them and we've been able to remarket it. We have not announced that on our social media site, but when we do, we'll announce that out, and we will provide financing for it too. So there you have it. But those are great questions. At the end of the day, we want to make sure our buyers are able to stay in the tiny homes, because there's a lot of passion that goes into this. This is a very unique, I want to say, eclectic niche, but it's also a way of beating inflation. It's a way for making it affordable, and it's a win-win for a lot of people. It's a win-win for the builder. It's a win-win for the homeowner. It's a win-win for being a little bit more independent, getting debt-free. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, we could just go through the list of all the benefits, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're providing you the know-how on how to get financing on these units.
Elizabeth has just posted one last question. Do builders have to be state registered or certified for your approval?
We do look at their registration, their licensing, their experience. So the answer is yes.
All right, Kendall. Well, I sure appreciate your going through this a second time with us. And we came up with some more questions this time, which was pretty interesting. But we have a hard stop here that we have to go to. So if we could go ahead and move on to the homework and any further questions, we can go ahead and answer those outside of this. And everybody blow up the chat. Thank Kendall for his time and effort here. While I go through the homework assignment for day 3, the money, it was to determine how much you need for your tiny dream home. In other words, how much will your home cost? And a good way to do that is to check out some of the other tiny houses similar to the ones that you are looking for and see what they're selling for. We already talked about, do you pay cash or can you finance? Well, you make a determination yourself. Are you going to want to pay cash, or are you going to be looking for some kind of financing on your tiny house? And then third question is, answer the question, are you planning on building it yourself as a DIY, or will you be hiring a builder? The fourth of your homework assignments is to invite another friend to the challenge, and then go on Facebook and share one thing that you like about this challenge as a whole. So that's it, guys. We already gave the giveaway, and we are wanting to move into tonight's in a few minutes. So I'm going to say goodbye to Kendall and everyone. And Jordan, will there be a separate link that will be sent out for this next session coming up at 7 o'clock?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Kendall.
Thank you. Good night, guys.
All right. Have a good weekend.
You too. Thanks, Robin.
Bye.
All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Bye.